The foreign editor, Rob Parsons, is with me here on set. Rob, big question, obvious question, I suppose. What happens next? Because there's that real fear, isn't there, of some kind of power vacuum now?
Yeah, I mean, for obvious reasons. There's so many different forces operating in Syria at the moment. Yes, it's true that HTS, as it's called, is the largest, the most efficient, and al-Jawlani, the commander of HTS, is the man who seems to be taking the bull by the horns in the country. But there are other parts of Syria. If you take the northeast, for instance, where the Syrian Democratic Forces of the Kurds are pretty much in charge. The northwest, Syrian National Army backed by Turkey. In the south, another organization which led the charge on Damascus over the last few days. So there are a lot of groups that are going to have to get on together, plus a lot of other people as well. For instance, the exiles, Syrian civilian exiles who were meant to be tasked with drawing up a new constitution by the UN in 2015. Are they going to have a role in the future? Hard to say at this point, but everybody, I think, is conscious of the things that could go badly wrong. First of all, this is a very divided country, split tribally, split on religious lines, split on ethnic lines. That alone is, a mix which suggests there could be problems. But if you look at other countries in the Middle East that have gone through similar upheavals, like Iraq or Libya, there are a lot of warning signals coming from there as well. So, al-Jawlani has indicated that he is conscious of all the pitfalls. And although over the last 8 years, his regime in Idlib province in the northwest of Syria has been quite hardline in religious terms, he's been signaling over the last couple of weeks that that is not how he wants to take things forward with Syria over the next few months and years. He's been signaling to Christians, Alawites, and others in Aleppo, for instance, that he wants to bring a more tolerant regime to Syria. We'll see, but one can see why there is a lot of concern in the country. Obviously, there's great excitement that finally the Assad regime has fallen, but people are worried about what the future will hold. People, I don't think, are going to be throwing away their weapons too soon. For instance, in the Alawite areas along the coast where the Assad family comes from, the Kurds certainly are not likely to want to give away the gains they've made in the northeast. So there's a lot of hard bargaining discussion needed to get the sort of progress and to avoid the pitfalls that we've seen, as I mentioned, in Iraq and Libya.
And what about that whole overall balance of power in the region? I mean, an enormous blow to Russia and to Iran. Where do they all fit into this as we go forward?
Well, what we're seeing is effectively the knock-on of Gaza. We were all talking at the time that the war, the risk of regional war, without actually seeing how this could play out. But we're seeing in particular, I think, with the collapse of Hezbollah and the effective defeat of Iran, the consequences of Gaza. Iran is the biggest loser in all this. Once Hezbollah was effectively undermined, run down, decapitated by Israel, Syria, in the form of Assad, lost its main prop on the ground. Without Hezbollah to do the fighting on the ground and without Iran's Revolutionary Guards, became almost impossible for Assad, even with Russian air support, albeit much reduced Russian air support. So that was the first consequence. Iran has lost a key building block in its attempt to build this Iranian crescent, going from Tehran through to the Mediterranean coast and round to Yemen with the Houthis in the south. It's very difficult to see how Iran is going to build that back. Similarly with Russia too, in 2015, when it came to the rescue of the Assad regime, Russia was congratulating itself on having returned to the international stage as a major player at the expense of the United States. That all looks like dreams now, because Russia's position is immensely weakened. As part of the deal in 2015, it got 49-year leases on the Hmeimim air base on the Mediterranean coast and the Tartus naval base. Hard to see how it's going to keep hold of those, and those are absolutely critical to its position in the Mediterranean. And many Russian generals who fought with the Syrian army were rewarded with big contracts in the reconstruction of the country, oil and gas. So they're going to lose out completely as well. It's humiliating for Russia. But because they were so bogged down in the war in Ukraine, there was very little they could do about it.
You talked a lot about Gaza at the beginning there. I mean, where does this leave Israel? Obviously, this, as you say, all began, didn't it, with the events after October the 7th, and the knock-on effects rippling still.
Absolutely. I mean, the situation is a particularly interesting one, I think, for Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has spoken of an opportunity, but also quite clearly an opportunity tinged with concern about what the future might bring. It's noticeable over the last 24 hours, Israel has sent its air force to target missile sites and chemical weapon sites inside Syria. And the reason for that is, although it's extremely happy that the Assad regime has collapsed, and with it, Iranian influence, Iran no longer has bases on the border with Syria, for instance. Although it's happy about that, it's worried about into whose hands all those weapons are going to fall. It's not going to be happy if jihadist organizations, which are determined to overthrow the state of Israel, get hold of that sort of weaponry and strengthen their position within Syria. So, it's a mixed bag for Israel at the moment.
Well, thanks very much, Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor here on France 24.